Let's do it. I don't know where Board got this number. I'm super curious. So you guys clue me in Twitch chat. Star Citizen raises 834 million. I thought we were at 600 plus like the 50 from the Calders. So I'm not sure. Over 1,100 staff and still growing. And this is him, Star Citizen financial statement stuff. So I guess he's breaking it down for us. I didn't look at it yet, so I'm very curious.
Hello and welcome to some more Star Citizen. CIG have just released their latest financial statements. These are very simple sort of company accounts for the year ending 2022. Yes, these are basically a year behind, but they do allow us to delve deeper into what CIG have attained income-wise for Star Citizen and Squadron 42 over the project's 11 years, as we also have the income earned for 2023 as well available to us. CIG also talk about where the project is now and where it's going. We're going to be looking at CIG's funding, its costs, its financial health, staff, expansion, all that sort of jazz, and
4250 mil? I thought that was the initial one.
Of their sort of statements about what's to come. So please bear in mind.
So that implies that it's 180 million in other investments? I'm so lost here.
These figures are rough, as there might be some changes with currency conversions. There are obviously the figures that Cloud Imperium are sharing with us in a very simple way. It's also some data from the funding tracker. The accuracy of this is reasonable, but it's not going to be perfect, right? So let's start out with how much the project has been funded. How much is it crowdfunded? How much money has it made over its 11 years of crowdfunding? Between 2012 and 2022, it appears to have made 637 million. That's a lot of money. In 2023, they raised...
You want to know something funny? It's actually not. Average that out by year, and given the type of game this is, it's really not that much. The game has not been as successful as obviously finished, released games. And I do think that and then obviously not like anime gacha games, right? Which is what people compare. Like those games make billions of dollars a month. Like, okay, great. Well, this isn't that. But I wonder what happens when Squadron releases. I think the trailer did really well. People seem really interested. And will there be refunds if it's not good? Sure. But will it make a lot of money? Probably. And it will probably make significantly more than we've made just Squadron, just in a release window, than we made in any year. Probably I think it could crack 100 million. Just that
134 million ish. So they raised 117 million in general funding from ships and that sort of stuff throughout the period of 2023. But that's not the whole story, as it doesn't include subscriptions and other income, which includes partnership income with various hardware and software vendors, sponsorship income, and various local incentives.
Is he adding 2023 to 2022?
Incentives based on...
And that's where he's getting this number, I think?
And location of development and production activities. So we're going to roughly assume that this set of money, this additional money, is around the same as what it was in 2022, and that basically gives them an additional 17 million, so 134 million for 2023. CIG also have private investments from Clive and Keith Calder, so this adds up to $63.23 million. They got 17.23 in March of 2020, and they got 46 million in December of 2018. All of this together is an approximate funding of Star Citizen to date of around $834 million.
But if we go to the funding thing, it says 650 something, right? Like if you just go to the website.
Star Citizen looks like it will easily break the $1 billion in crowdfunding barrier before it's released. However,
that's just but then at the beginning, he stops at 2022 and says 630 million just from us. So that's the part that I'm lost. When I saw 834, I'm like, what? That's why I clicked this video.
Might not be the same with Squadron 42. That could certainly be released before they smash through that, especially if it's...
they only count pledges on the tracker. See, I don't follow this stuff, so I don't really know. They don't even count sub revenue there. Interesting. Okay. Padding the numbers? I don't know. I mean, there's no point in padding the numbers.
Released in 2024 or before the halfway point of 2025. So Clan Imperium said a lot about what happened throughout 2022 in regards to their funding. The 2022 accounting shows that Clan Imperium grew again, with total income up 30% on last year's record-breaking annual performance. The regular and improving game deliveries with increased playability and stability was a key part of our success in 2022. But unlike in 2021, the performance was more consistent throughout the year. Also, departing from prior years leading up to 2022, the US growth in income was higher than that of the rest of the world. It is difficult to draw direct conclusions for this shift, but the instability caused by the Russian-Ukraine conflict and the generally slower rebound of the European economy in 2022 compared to the US seems to be a likely factor.
US
Costs
better,
including CAPEX,
clearly.
which is capital
What's
expenditure,
up?
also increased by 29%. Although excluding CAPEX, principally focused on the rest of the...
Finally, the US was better at something than the EU. Spending our money on Star Citizen. Get wrecked, EU losers.
World offices, trading costs rose moderately compared to income by 18% in 2022. Nearly all cost categories were up on the previous year, but overheads, external game development, and publishing operations, including customer servicing costs, were the main drivers
they had
for
tons
this
of
increase
costs.
in costs. Salaries and related costs for game development and support remained the
EU
highest
stonks
spend
are down,
category,
boys.
accounting for almost half of the total operational spend in 2022, and almost 60% when factoring in growth in external game development costs, managed mainly through the US. 2022 continued the trend of record-breaking growth, with revenue up 32% to 114 million. This was fueled by a growth in player numbers and increased player time arising from...
And we had just a slight bit of growth this year in terms of revenue, but they literally had to sell their soul to do it with like the F8C and stuff.
Regular content delivery earlier in the year and improved game stability throughout the full
And I imagine their expenses went up even more.
year. Subscriptions were up 6% to 5.3 million, and other income raised 21% to 11.4 million, driven in part by the growth of the UK development and associated credits arising thereof. The vast majority of revenues are of starter pack pledges, granting access to Star Citizen's alpha game, as well as spaceships and digital items immediately delivered and playable in the game. A significantly smaller fraction of revenues came
server
from
costs
pledges
must be
of
insane.
concept ships. I just thought it was a nice little bit of extra info there that Clan Imperium shared. So, how much have CIG spent then? So, trading costs from 2012 to 2022 are around 631 million. If we assume that costs are roughly the same for 2023, although I am going to add on 10% more for wage increases and new staff, let's say an additional...
Wasn't there also a lot of inflation this year?
136 million for the year of 2023, then the total costs are roughly 767 million to date. Going back to some CIG statements on 2022's costs, with much still to do, Clan Imperium pushed forward with its objectives, and
Oh my God. Did he 700 something million spent on what we have now so far? It just doesn't seem right.
commensurate growth in its cost base accordingly.
It doesn't seem
Costs
fair.
increased by 18% over 2021 to 116.5 million, and capital expenditure, primarily for the flagship offices in Manchester, England, and the new facilities in Frankfurt, Germany, rose to 12.9 million compared to only 2 million in 2021. The US operations grew slightly in 2022, although like the previous year, there was a continued shift in the mix of personnel as publishing, community, and marketing teams grew, whilst internal development contracted in the US, although with a rise in management of more external development resources, mainly from the associated entity Turbulent, which...
Okay, EU, you win this one. Internal development contracted in the US. That means we were worse. So EU, you get the W on actually developing, where we just kind of hang out and spend money.
Which is based in Montreal. So basically, Clan Imperium saying there that a lot of the
Montreal's
work
our
is
only
now being
hope.
done by Montreal, especially in the US, and they...
Since they're like mostly French Canadian, they're like kind of EU, which saves us. So they're North American, but they're not like American. You know what I mean?
of contracted
Good job, EU.
development teams or
you know, I can't wait for people to take these jokes seriously. If this goes up on the React channel, it's going to be hilarious.
Internal staff and internal devs for external devs in the Montreal studio, at least when we're talking about the US, because the rest of the world operations grew considerably, with headcount up 18% on 2021 and additional space taken on to facilitate future growth. All cost areas except general and admin, G&A, increased in 2022, although the growth in publishing operations was not as significant as in the previous year, which had set the groundwork for the projected growth in customer numbers and playtime, which...
Also, like, anybody who calls Board a shield, this is a classic board gamer video. He literally has the text on screen and is just reading the text on the screen.
Trended upwards
that is from
towards the end of 2021 and continued on an even greater trajectory upward in 2022.
Based Gamer
Salaries
UK
are the biggest expense for CIG as they grow their workforce and their studios and all that sort of jazz. They increased employees in 2022 from 748 to 860 by the end of the year. Plus, externally, another 150 at Turbulent. Salaries and contractor costs being 66.8 million during that year. Though CIG did expand their studios massively, which contributed to some...
Yo, Elliot is rich, guys.
...of the other big costs increases and all that sort of jazz. So what's CIG's health looking like? What's the money in the bank? So CIG showed their net position as basically money in the bank at the end of 2022 as 64.7 million. That's relatively healthy. Now, if we translate that based on the figures that we talked about to end of 2023, to me, I'm expecting them to have around 67 million in the bank. Not a lot more.
Ooh, I do not. So I think that's where his numbers are going to be the most off. Is that I think I think they have an additional 200 employees. I think that they're, because I believe I've heard the word 1,300. They're spending like crazy. Everybody expenses are up across the board. They bought Turbulent in 2022 or 2023. I think they bought Turbulent in 2023. That's a huge expense. I think their expenses are going to be up significantly in 2023, which is why they went so hard on crazy ship sales towards the end of the year to make up.
Only a couple of million more. I'm expecting
merged. Okay, did the merger happen in 2023?
And obviously, there isn't going to be an increase in wages and staffing costs. That said, there could have been massive changes in costs that I'm unaware of. So
yeah,
we'll
I
sort
think
of have to wait
2023 ends in the red or close to it
next year to know for sure. Certainly, CIG are going to see less external dev costs with the acquisition of Turbulent, but then obviously more internal.
They repaid their loans and are in a good position to recontract another one. They're fairly well off, all things considered. I'm not saying that they're not well off. I just think this year was a tough year. I think it was one of the years where it was like they might have had to dip a little bit into some things.
Other costs might potentially come down, but staff costs are going to have gone up at least 10%. They keep on getting more and more staff. I think it's around 1,100 that they have now. CIG continues. In keeping with prior years, the 2022 accounting shows the group continued to spend its income on the ongoing development and publishing of the games in its unrelenting objective to deliver a world-class game.
And that's what they do. That's the one thing of like, this game's a scam. Well, they're spending the money on development, and the only scam is the development that they're spending is not on Star Citizen. They're spending it on Squadron 42, right? I had to make a comment to somebody on React channel about the new inventory that we saw at CitizenCon, and they were like, "That's ridiculous. Why wouldn't they have the ability to loot armor in the inventory?" And it was like, because they were only developing Squadron 42 with zero thought in mind on Star Citizen, right? They were blinders on making Squadron 42. And in Squadron 42, you're in the military. You're not taking some pirate's armor. You're wearing your military armor. You're not changing it. So that was like, if you want to be upset, you be upset that they are spending all of your time, all of your money, all of everything on the game that you can't play yet, right? That could be your argument. The only other argument here that is going against what CIG is saying is, yes, it's going to the ongoing development, but Chris, Sandy, Aaron, Ortwin, all the originals, how much are they getting paid? Right? Versus the, frontline type developers. How much are they getting paid, So that's like where the you can argue is the scam is there. But
gaming and social experience for its players and community, beside reinvesting into its people.
About $300,000 a year. Okay,
particularly turbulent.
It's better than I thought it would.
Teams
like cheaper.
Servicing Cloud Imperium games grew considerably during the year. It also put substantial funds into its new offices and facilities to create a destination space for its post-COVID returning staff.
Yeah, I think Chris is taken well over $1 million, I would assume, and it would be crazy if he didn't. So I'm surprised.
Creating an environment to encourage collaboration, innovation, and creativity to make all the hard work undertaken and still to come more pleasant for its growing number of people
fucking Bobby
on
guys.
The games. Consequently, the funds on the balance sheet moved little in 2022, despite a very successful year, and they remained earmarked for future activities planned and required to push the games forward to the commercial launch and the ongoing evolution of the underlying technology and intellectual property being developed. So that's an important thing to make clear with Star Citizen. They are supposed to be spending almost all of that money on the game. Well, really, all of the money on the game in some way, shape, or form. Obviously, having some cash reserves, super important to make sure that they are able to continue producing the game, and stuff could happen for sure where they need more money one year and less money another. Also, they're going to want to run a big advertising campaign for Squadron 42's release. But I know some people are going to be saying, why haven't CIG got more and more money in their bank account all of the time?
Why don't they have more money? Because they didn't make a game yet.
Year on year.
If they make a game, they are going to be huge. If they make a game, if Squadron's decent, they're going to do really well. If Star Citizen is good, they're a new AAA studio. Like, then you can start comparing them to your Bethesda, your Blizzard, But they got to do that stuff first.
Supposed to be spending that on the game, and hopefully that will make a much better game because of the way they are spending their money. What about now, though? So, 2023, Cloud Imperium are saying that despite the significant cost of dedicating more resources to Squadron 42 at the expense of ongoing regular releases on Star Citizen, particularly in the first 3 quarters of 2023, we have progressed Squadron 42 to a level of feature complete, which is very significant as a step
we know all this, obviously,
to the final release for this hugely ambitious AAA game. At our first physical CitizenCon in several years at the Los Angeles Convention Center, we unveiled the progress made behind closed doors, and we're happy to show how this will translate into Star Citizen's universe and the ongoing releases that are planned over the coming months and years. In 2023, we were also very pleased to have completed the acquisition of Turbulent,
so that was
which we announced in July. As noted in this and previous reports,
Turbulent, and they said acquired, not merged,
part of our operations, and we have been working with them since the early days of the company's founding. They understand us and our goals, and thus it was natural that we would formalize that relationship and bring their key people into our leadership team. It is great to harness the skills and talents of 200 plus people working there who augment our internal teams and represent a large part of our worldwide workforce, which now exceeds 1,100 devs. Well, actually not devs, 1,100 employees worldwide. In conclusion, 2023 has not been
1,000 marketers, 100 developers.
An inexpensive year, but we've had
Prove me wrong.
Record-breaking year again. End of the year, and the targeted investments we've made have been focused upon our goals, setting us closer to achieving our vision and mission to deliver a gaming experience and universe of truly epic scale, fidelity, and quality for all our current and future players and community. Boom! That's it for Star Citizen's financial report and update. I always love seeing this stuff because it gives deeper information about how Cloud Imperium see themselves and how they spent the money and what costs are rising.
I also feel like they are a little bit like, I forgot what other podcast I listened to, but he's like a lawyer and stuff, and he always looks at the British filings, like the UK filings, and the numbers always are very different at the end of the year thing that they show us than are in the UK filings.
And yeah, we knew that they're going to have more staff costs.
They
Staff
move things
wages are going
around
up.
to make it
They
look a
want,
certain
I
way
think,
to us.
between 1,300 and 1,500.
So, like, in general, that statement, it's not like we're their investors. So the statement that they send to the Calders or that they share internally might look very different than the one that they share externally to us. And I imagine it does.
100 in the next couple of years staff total. They're at 1,100 now. That's a lot of staff. Their studio in the UK is massive. They've expanded the Frankfurt one. They're going to be expanding the other studios around the world. Obviously, Montreal studio, the Tobin studio, is now officially theirs, and they're going to be expanding that further. I think them having between 50 and 70 million in the bank is pretty healthy, especially if they want to be doing big advertising campaigns and want to have some money just in case that there is a downturn in the economy. But I'm really interested to know what you think. Did you expect Clan Imperium to actually have more than 835 million-ish funding to date? When are you thinking that they're going to break that 1 billion barrier? Could it be
Guard
next
frequency.
year? I think it's unlikely, because they'd have to make a huge amount more funding. But with the Squadron 42 release, I suppose they could. But then is it really crowdfunding? As soon as they actually have a live product, it's a little bit different because it's not this crowdfunded money anymore.
And let me tell you something. He's right. And that is the biggest thing here. If they don't spend that money on development, ooh, that's the scam. If they make, let's say, bang, first 3 months of Squadron, they make 150 million. If I don't know how much goes to the Calders right away, but if they don't put that money back into Star Citizen's development, we should all be rioting. Every single one of us. I don't see how anybody wouldn't be upset about that. Every single dollar of that money needs to go into Star Citizen's development because Star Citizen's money has went to that game's development. And that would be so unfair. But that's probably what's going to happen. They got to pay the investors back, right? That's what they pay the that at least when they shared us that they had investors, that's what they said was kind of the thing. The investments were made for Squadron 42 advertising. I mean, they lied to us then, probably they'll lie to us again, but that's what they told us at that time. They just holding that money for until then? I don't think so. They probably used it. So I don't think it was actually used for that. But yeah, I think a majority of the funding came from Star Citizen. I'm not saying nobody wants to play Squadron 42 like somebody in chat is saying, devs, but a lot of people do. And a lot of people are interested in Squadron 42. And I think that they're going to sell a lot of copies. If the trailer shows anything, they're going to sell some copies. And if they don't take that money and reinvest it back in the game that made that game happen, oof.
Yeah, as soon as they have a properly released product, I think it sort of changes a bit. Maybe we need a bit of a breakdown of what's been spent on this.
Did they need an investor? Yeah.
What's been spent on the crowdfunding for Star Citizen.
I don't think we have Star Citizen if they didn't invest.
Did you expect CIG to have more in the bank, or their costs to be higher, costs to be lower? Whatever your thoughts or questions, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. The giant ape climbed the skyscraper, swatting at helicopters.
Awesome. That I don't really get into the financial stuff very much, so I don't get to look at I don't get to see as deeply into this. So I'm glad Board did it, and I'm able to kind of watch and understand a little bit better through him. I think he takes it down to a level that I can understand without having to read through all the stuff. But yeah, man, that's my biggest thing. Is I really hope they reinvest after Squadron. We know that they're reinvesting the developers, but I really hope they reinvest the money. Right? I really hope they reinvest the money. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. And their argument is going to be that the money was spent on both games, but in reality, we saw Citizen Con. That was Squadron stuff. And as it's coming into the game, it is very apparent that none of that stuff was ready for us yet. Right? So, dang. Fingers crossed, though.